Hello there, my name is Stephen Pitt. On paper, it would seem like the UK film industry is in a strong place, at least according to Social Film's UK Film Industry Statistics Report for 2025. The film and TV sector contributed £12.6 billion towards the UK economy, with there being over 16,000 active production companies as of 2022. In that same year, £1.97 billion was spent on film production, with 220 films being produced. But look a little closer, and it paints a much bleaker picture. Those 220 films? Counted among them are Hollywood blockbusters that film in locations such as Pinewood Studios, so Barbie was classed as a British production, just because it was filmed here. The spending on domestic UK features was only £173 million, which was a decrease from £253 million the year before. And most of those production companies are small independents with fewer than 10 employees. So it seems that the British film industry mainly functions as another production base for Hollywood. The rest of these films are made up of a scattering of low-budget productions, reliant on funding from government bodies. The knock-on effect of this is that great British filmmakers can only find success by working in the Hollywood system. And freelance British film crew workers have become dependent on American productions and are affected by events in the US film industry. But this wasn't always the case. Britain once had a thriving industry of major studios and production companies, such as Ealing Studios, the Rank Organisation, and Hammer Films. They produced classic and still celebrated British films such as Brief Encounter, Ealing comedies such as The Lady Killers, social realist dramas such as Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, and the Hammer horror films of the 1950s. And that's just to name a few. I could make an entire video on the history of British films from the 40s to the 1960s. By the 1980s, the industry had declined due to several factors. Companies such as Rank diversified away from film production and then abandoned it when it became less profitable. And before, these films and companies had been supported by a tax on box office receipts, but this was scrapped in 1985, as film production and cinema attendances had still been declining in previous years. The studio films would then be replaced by low-budget films financed by government-funded organisations such as Film 4, or co-productions between small indie companies and foreign studios. This led to a brief indie boom in the 90s and 2000s, with classics such as Danny Boyle's Trainspotting and Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead. But the sun seems to be setting on British film now. If you want an indication of the health of the British film scene, look at what's showing at any British cinema right now. How many British films do you see being shown compared to American ones? Also, look at the highest grossing films at the UK box office each year. Complete American domination. Now, let's look at France and South Korea, two countries with similar sized populations to the UK, but with very healthy film industries. If you look at the listings in a cinema in either of those countries, you'll find domestic films make up a good chunk of, if not nearly half of the films available to see. And when you look at the highest grossing films in those countries, you see more of a healthy mix of domestic and American. So is there something we can learn from the French and Koreans that can help restore British film to its former glory? Let's start with France, the birthplace of cinema itself. The French film scene has gained a reputation abroad for its art house movies, such as the experimental films of the French New Wave of the 1960s, or their contemporary award-winning dramas such as Blue is the Warmest Colour and Anatomy of a Fall. In 2024, domestic French films made up a higher percentage of the market share in France compared to Hollywood films, something that would be unthinkable here in the UK. So what are the French doing differently? Most French films are produced and financed by several major studios that operate in the private sector, such as Pathé and Gaumont, the two oldest film companies in the world. But there's something else these established French studios share in common with small independent productions. They receive partial funding from the CNC, or National Centre for Cinema and the Moving Image. This is a government agency that helps support and promote the film, television, and even video game industry in France. Now, this doesn't seem much different compared to the UK industry, where publicly funded organisations such as the British Film Institute can provide funding to productions that meet certain criteria. But where the French are beating us is in their selective aid or advance on receipt system. This is a fund that's advanced to first-time directors that's meant to be paid back if the film becomes profitable, but since few of these films make enough money to do so, it essentially operates as a grant. For a more detailed explanation of the CNC and how they function, please watch Nerdwriter1's video. There'll be a link in the description. According to Tim Palmer's book, Brutal Intimacy, Analysing Contemporary French Cinema from the late 2000s, first-time directors made up 40% of film directors in French film each year. Now, I'm not sure how much that figure's changed since then, but considering the average advance on receipt received is €480,000, it's no surprise that aspiring French filmmakers are having an easier time breaking into the industry compared to their British counterparts. I know I would be over the moon if I could receive that type of money to make a feature. And it's clearly benefiting the French film scene, with the stats I mentioned earlier. Variety declared France as Europe's healthiest theatrical market, and it's no surprise given that there's a regular influx of fresh creators with new ideas. So could this work in the UK? Well, let's look at how the CNC gets its funding. It's actually similar to the old British system, where box office receipts are taxed and fed back into the film industry. Though it's unclear how helpful this would be to the British film industry, as this would likely result in higher cinema ticket prices. And given how expensive going to the cinema is these days already, and considering the current cost of living crisis, it's not going to be good for the UK cinema attendances, which still hasn't recovered to pre-pandemic levels. And also, the UK system is still left with the same issue of one agency gatekeeping what type of films can and can't get made. Or at least with the French system of first-time directors not being required to make a profit on their projects, it's a change from the usual free market system of companies only financing films if they expect a return on their investment. Now, let's look to the east and the nation of South Korea. Korean pop culture has taken the world by storm over the past 2 decades. Korean pop bands such as BTS have become popular in the West. Korean TV dramas such as Squid Game have become extremely successful on streaming services, resulting in Korean shows being the most watched non-American content on Netflix, overtaking the UK. And then there's the Korean film scene, which features films that have achieved international acclaim, from Oldboy in 2003 to Parasite in 2019, which won both the Palme d'Or and the Oscar for Best Picture. And just like with France, Korean films on average enjoy 50% of the box office market share in their home country. But this wasn't always the case. Back in the early 90s, facing competition from Japan, Hong Kong and Hollywood, South Korean films only achieved 16% of the market share. So how did South Korea's film industry get to where it is now? 1992 saw the release of Marriage Story. No, not that one. It was the first Korean film to be partially financed by a chaebol, which is a conglomerate corporation such as Samsung in this example. The financing, production, distribution, and exhibition would all be controlled by a single company, streamlining the filmmaking process. This saw a greater investment in Korean film from the private sector. And in the aftermath of the Asian financial crisis of the late 90s, these chaebols sought to expand into foreign markets, contributing to the interest in Korean culture from abroad. And as some chaebols later diversified away from film, unlike with British film in the 70s and 80s, there was enough demand in the market initially created by the chaebols that medium-sized production companies could then fill that void. Though this seems the complete opposite of the French model, this growth in the Korean film industry can't solely be attributed to the private sector. Going back to the Asian financial crisis, this motivated the South Korean government to move away from the chaebols, with the viewpoint that the Korean economy was too reliant on them. South Korea's president at the time pushed for information technology and popular culture as the 2 key drivers for the future Korea. The latter would be an important export product that could help rebrand Korea and be used to give it cultural soft power. Increased infrastructure spending has also benefited the film industry. Korea is one of the few nations that invests funds into startup companies. In 2012, government funds constituted over 25% of all venture capital money dispersed in Korea, and 1/3 of all venture capital in Korea is spent on the entertainment industry. Government involvement also extends to the exhibition stage of filmmaking. The screen quota system is enforced, meaning Korean cinemas must screen domestic movies for a set period of time, formerly 146 days, but dropping to 73 days in recent years. So what's stopping the UK from following the same system? Well, simply, the UK doesn't really have that many equivalents of its own large conglomerates like the chaebols, and certainly none that are willing to invest in film. Funnily enough, Virgin did open a production company, Virgin Produced, in 2010, in the United States. Though the South Korean system is a seemingly perfect blend of government and free market involvement, the government is enforcing these companies to invest in films. Now, the UK government could encourage this through tax incentives or partial investment, though it already offers tax incentives, which is why so many Hollywood productions come to film here. In fairness, the UK has seen significant investment in recent years, similar to South Korea. This is in its TV industry, where Netflix has invested $6 billion over the past 4 years to produce hit programs such as Baby Reindeer and Adolescence, providing work for over 50,000 cast and crew. It's a shame that this investment isn't extending to the film industry, but maybe that's a worrying sign of the decline in interest in film as a medium. It's also a shame that again, Britain is having to rely on investment from the Americans, instead of being able to stand on its own. Of course, there's no simple solution to the problems facing the British film industry, but government should always be looking to other countries to see if there's a better way of doing things, and that's not just for film. And there's no reason why British films can't achieve the same level of success that French and South Korean films have had. The fact that we're an English-speaking nation should give us an advantage in the American market. And we're constantly pumping out talented actors that make it big in the Hollywood system, once their talents become too big for the constraints of the UK industry. We have the potential to be bigger than we are. It just requires the right investment and the right strategy. Thanks for watching. Shout out to Nerdwriter. I relied a lot on his video about the French film system and the CNC for research. Be sure to like and subscribe.